All right, my guest today is Andy No. He has brought a new thing to American journalism, namely journalism. You can tell because the other journalists are so envious of him, they hate him. He's been out there covering Antifa, which has been causing some of the worst civil strife this country has ever seen. He drew national attention when they beat the living daylights out of him, I think in 2019 in Portland. He has a book, Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. It was a New York Times bestseller. Andy, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
So I saw pictures of Portland a couple of days ago. I don't know, you may have taken them actually. It looked like the Weimar Republic. I mean, it was the Proud Boys and Antifa shooting at each other and throwing gas and fireworks and all this stuff. Have you been up there recently?
The last time I did field reporting undercover was in May of this year, and I was assaulted very badly by them again.
And what is going on in Portland? I mean, is it still this violent?
Well, I've been writing and recording and speaking out about Antifa for 5 years now. They became a mainstream phenomenon in Portland and other American cities after the election win of Trump in 2016. And that's because they had now a propaganda machine in the press who were pumping out day in and day out this claim that America had experienced a fascist takeover under Trump, that this is an existential threat for immigrants, people of color, sexual minorities. These are all lies, but it radicalized the public and it radicalized the mainstream left to be much, much more tolerant of political violence, if not advocates and participants of it themselves. So yes, the images and videos out of Portland from, you're talking about the end of August, there was a really bad riot there, but these are clashes that happen really routinely in the city. And it's not just Antifa versus right-wing violence, it's about actually freedom of expression itself being under threat through violence. It's been under threat actually for a number of years. You cannot have, for example, a Christian worship event in public in Portland or a conservative rally or a flag waving rally. You cannot have that there unless you have your own private security, private militia. And so these groups and individuals who want to engage in their First Amendment protected activities will do it, and they'll come with their security. Antifa will announce publicly their intentions to shut it down through the use of violence, and they do. They come, and then people brawl on the street. The violence spills onto the streets. People bring their weapons. People nearly get killed. Last year, somebody did get killed in a politically motivated murder, with just almost a 1 year anniversary, just over it. And that was when a self-described Antifa member stalked a Trump supporter in downtown Portland and shot him dead, and then became a fugitive before being killed by federal authorities.
Where are the police during these things?
That's a great question. People are angry at police, but it's not really their fault. And I'm speaking as somebody who's been assaulted several times right by the central police station, and I never get help, and there's been no arrests. So I'm a big critic of the Portland Police Department, but the reason why law enforcement don't respond, and they actually announced ahead of this last riot that they weren't going to be intervening, and a number of variables. One, in response to George Floyd's death last year, Portland, like many cities, defunded police. And then on top of that, the politicians and the public demoralized officers so severely that dozens and dozens of them resigned or took early retirement. And the Portland Police Department, like departments in urban areas across the US, is really struggling to hire. So on one level, you have an issue of actually there just not being the actual resources to respond. Two, and some of the other consequences of that law enforcement pullback because of the demands of BLM and Antifa is that Portland is experiencing now its record number of homicides and violent crimes. Another thing you have is that whenever police do respond, the officers get injured, when they tried to make arrests of the Antifa rioters, this whole media apparatus works to release these videos that are selectively edited to make it look like the police are using excessive force. And then that launches lawfare. All these Antifa rioters and rioting suspects have so much support from these far left legal groups and who have untold sums of money that they're able to crowdfund to pay for bail, to pay for legal aid, and to launch lawsuits. So Portland police have just decided they're not going to respond anymore, really. And so that's why you see what happened recently and what's been going on now for actually a number of years.
It's absolutely amazing that you are virtually the only reporter covering this story. I mean, this is not a mainstream story at all, and you've been attacked in the press for being, you're not a journalist because you're actually telling the truth about this. Joe Biden famously said that Antifa is just an idea. Several people in the news media have compared them to the men who stormed the beaches at Normandy because they were fighting fascists. And after all, it's right there in the name, Antifa. Who are these guys? I mean, obviously, they're not just, you don't get beaten up by an idea. Is this one big organization? Is it a coalition of organizations? What is it?
Well, the name is a misnomer, and that's intentional.
Obviously, yeah.
It's meant to fool low information people into thinking that these are anti-fascists who are protecting civil rights, protecting people of color, protecting sexual minorities, when in reality, they exist as a coalition of extremist far left groups who advocate for terrorist attacks against the state, against citizens, against overthrowing the Constitution. I write about all of that in my book, and I think every day that their violence is documented and their murders and their attempted murders, I ask how much more do they need to show who they really are on camera for the public to believe it? Like they tried so hard to assault all the journalists and reporters and independent journalists who have cameras that to date, we're not getting a lot of video. But fortunately, some of the assaults were captured on camera recently at the end of August in Portland. And anti-fascism, Antifa, it's just a branding thing. It's similar to the misnomer of Black Lives Matter. Like, how could you be opposed to a movement or group that, says it is to protect the lives of Black people? Well, again, you just pull back, look at the ideology, look at the statements made by those who are involved in the organizations, and you'll see what they actually are, which they're militant far left extremists with a revolutionary agenda, and they advocate for the use of violence at times. And, I think I'm ready to move beyond the debates about theory and ideology of Antifa. This is a group that actually kills. And just this week, the LAPD made an arrest of an alleged Antifa member who was involved in an attempted murder. There was a number of weeks ago in August, there was an anti-masking protest outside LA City Hall, and Antifa showed up. There was brawling in the streets, and somebody got stabbed in the chest. This victim, who's a Hispanic man, by the way, suffered a lacerated heart and a punctured lung. Well, this individual, Eric Cohen, a suspect, has been arrested by the LAPD. And in Portland, there are pending charges against somebody who is accused of throwing firebomb at a group of law enforcement who has attempted murder charges. So, this is a serious thing, and it's not new in that America, going back decades, has dealt with far left terrorists in this country, and people forget that. And that's intentional, by the way, by the press and those who hold the reins of cultural power and academia and information control. Like, people don't know, people my age and younger don't know about the Black Liberation Army or the Weather Underground, because all these members of these former groups, these convicted terrorists, they've been rehabilitated into respectable professions such as academia. The district attorney of San Francisco, his father and mother were involved in the Weather Underground terrorist group and were jailed for it. And the former New York governor, Cuomo, just let, in his final days before leaving office, release Chester Bowden's father, and he was involved in a conspiracy crime where 3 people were murdered. So, yeah, there are so many layers of issues here.
Yeah, we're talking to Andy Ngo. It's spelled N-G-O. His book is called Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Andy, thank you very much for coming on. I hope you come back. I'd like to talk about this more.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
All right, it's great to meet you.